Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So in this video today, we'll be solving some sample scenario-based question and answers for your PMP certification exam in 2023. So we'll be discussing a wide range of topics across the PMP exam syllabus, covering questions from waterfall projects and also covering extensively agile and hybrid project management topics as well. So if you are preparing for the PMP certification exam in 2023, this video will help you understand the type of questions that you might expect in the actual exam. Now, while solving these questions, guys, I'll be time and again referring to this video on my YouTube channel that talks about the exact framework that you need to use in your PMP exam when you solve a scenario-based or situational question. So make sure you watch this video during the initial stages of your PMP exam preparation. Also, I would like you to track your performance in this video when you solve the questions with me, okay? So the target will be to get all the 5 out of 5 questions correct, okay? However, even if you get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct in this video, you can consider yourself fairly well prepared for your PMP exam. Now, anything less than 4, you might need a bit more preparation, okay? So with that, let's start with question number 1.
Okay, so the first question, guys, pause the video, read the question properly and try to answer it before moving forward. Right, so we'll start solving the question. So as step number 1, we will first read the question, read the options and try to categorize it as a type 1 or a type 2 question, right? And while reading the question, we have to ensure that we have to read the question word by word. So make sure you don't skim through the question, okay? Right. So you have been reassigned from a completed project into a new project as the project manager, okay? You find out that there are some conflicts between a few stakeholders of this project. So in the new project, you find out that there is a few conflicts that's happening between the stakeholders. Susan, the quality manager, has been communicating directly with the project team, providing them instructions over meetings, emails, and memos. Okay. However, the project team has kept on working with the baseline plan, ignoring Susan's inputs. This has caused Susan to escalate the issue to the project sponsor. Okay. Now, the sponsor is concerned about Susan's behavior and also about the low morale in the project team. What should you do as the project manager? Right, so there are 4 options. Now, if we see the stem of the question, there is a scenario and it's asking that what should you do as the project manager? So it is hinting to a type 1 question, which is about the ideal project manager behavior framework. Okay, now before evaluating the option, if you have seen the previous video, we have to make sure that we need to follow the positive bias principle. Now, what is the positive bias principle? It means that we will not reject any option without solid grounds of reasoning. Okay, so as long as I'm not able to find a solid, sane ground of reasoning to reject an option, that option will stay on the table, right? So with that in light, let's start evaluating the options. Option A, perform a root causing of the issue as part of the investigation. Now, it may seem a very dry option to many of you, but mind that root causing a problem is a key skill of a good project manager. Okay, so we'll hold this option for now. Option B, call a meeting and invite Susan to discuss the project communication plan. Now, some of you may say that if you invite Susan to the communication plan discussion, probably her behavior will correct. Okay, so we'll hold this option for now. Okay, let's move on to option number C. Advise your team to stick to the baseline plan and let you deal with Susan. Okay, now that is not a preferable approach, guys. Okay, so that way the message you are sending to Susan is you do not involve your team in terms of the discussion with the stakeholders, right? So that way the team will always try to assign you to some problematic situations when you are dealing with the stakeholders, and always feel that the project manager will always be dealing with difficult discussions whenever it comes in a project. Okay, so as a project manager, you don't want to set that expectation with your team, right? So option C is incorrect. Let's see option D. Perform a off the record conversation with Susan and resolve her concerns personally. Now, in a corporate environment or a professional environment, guys, you do not do such discussions which are off the record. Okay, so this is a red flag word which should immediately start to ring alarm bells within your mind. Okay, and also solving something personally is very different from solving something involving the team, involving the whole corporate environment which you are working with, right? So this way of dealing with problems, which option D is mentioning, might be okay in a personal or informal environment with your friends or relatives, but in a corporate project environment, this is not the preferable approach. Okay, so we'll eliminate option D as well. Now, after the first round of iteration, we are left with option A and option B. Now, if we closely look at option B, guys, calling a meeting and inviting Susan to discuss the project communication plan may not give you the intended results. Okay, now I'll tell you why. Now Susan may come into the meeting and say that, you know what, okay, I have listened to your communication plan, I will try to abide by it as much as possible, but you know what, you need to address the concerns I am having, and I feel that your project team is not taking the considerations of quality into your project deliverables. Now, how will you answer that? So in this situation, just discussing the project communication plan might not be the best approach, because of the primary reason that it will not resolve the concerns that Susan is having. And you know what will resolve the concerns that Susan is having? It is by performing the root causing of the issue as part of the investigation. Maybe you have missed out a critical stakeholder from Susan's team. Maybe you were not able to identify Susan as a critical stakeholder in the identify stakeholder stage, in the initiation stage of a project. Okay, so all these data will come up if you do a good root causing of the problem and try to solve the issue at its core. Okay, rather than maybe just calling Susan in a meeting, or maybe just telling your team not to listen to what Susan is saying and continue with the way they are doing the project, etc., etc., right? So for that reason, guys, option B is an incorrect option, and the correct answer to this question is option A, which is to perform a root causing of the issue as part of the investigation, which links back to the core project management behavior framework that a good project manager always tries to solve a problem from the root cause, and they don't solve a problem superficially. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is option A.
If you are liking this video, guys, please press the like button. Also, if you are preparing for the PMP certification exam, check out my mock simulator and my 35 PDU training course on the PMP certification exam on Udemy. Both the courses are very highly rated amongst the students, and a lot of PMP aspirants have already passed their exam with the help of these courses. Okay, I will provide the links in the description section of this video. Now let's move on to question number 2.
Right, so let's move on to question number 2. Pause the video here, read the question properly, and try to answer it before moving forward. Right, so let's start solving this question together. As part of an overarching program, a healthcare infrastructure project is planning to deliver a mobile surgery theater solution. Okay, the supplier providing the technology needs to demonstrate a proof of principle before rollout. So this is often called a proof of concept, or also called prototyping. Okay, the agile part of the project is scheduled to complete in 12 weeks. Okay, now we can safely assume that this proof of principle or prototyping part of the project is the agile part of the project which is being referred to in this question. Now, however, there has been a long feedback list of improvement ideas suggested by the control user group on the prototype model. Some of these are dependent on external events, which can trigger unforeseen costs and scheduling issues. How should the project manager manage this situation? And there are 4 options which are given. Now, if we go back to our steps of solving scenario-based question, guys, what we need to do first is to read the stem of the question and identify whether it's a type 1 or a type 2 question. Now, if you see here, the scenario is given, most probably it's a hybrid or a agile kind of scenario. And with the stem, which mentions that how should the project manager manage this situation, typically hints to a type 1 question. Okay, so it will be the ideal project manager behavior framework coupled with the positive bias principle that we need to use. And what is positive bias principle, guys? It is the premise that we will not reject any option until and unless there is a solid reason to reject that option. Okay, now with that in mind, let's try to evaluate the options A, B, C, and D and try to find out the correct answer. Option A, reassign the outstanding user stories to the next sprint. Okay, now this is incorrect, guys. Okay, because there has been a long feedback list of improvements already with you, and also you are in a particular sprint at this moment. Now this typically means that you are not taking into consideration any outstanding issue in your current sprint and just pushing off these issues into the next sprint. Okay, now that is not right in a agile project. During sprints in agile projects, you always do an exercise which is called a backlog refinement exercise. Okay, you might want to watch this video on my YouTube channel which talks about the different ceremonies of agile projects, and here I have explained what a backlog refinement exercise is. So that happens during the sprint. Now, reassigning user stories to the next sprint and not taking into consideration the problems or, let's say, the concerns that the user stories are bringing with them in a particular sprint is not a good approach as a scrum master or the product owner. Okay, so for that reason, option A is incorrect. Option B, choose which feedback ideas to include and which ones to reject on a personal basis. Now, this might have been a good option, but you know which part of this option makes this an incorrect option? It is this part of personal experience, because this is totally off track from a servant leadership behavior. And with this option, what you are doing is you are taking the team out of the equation and taking a decision yourself. Okay, so that is incorrect. So for that reason, option B is incorrect as well. Now make a note, guys, how we are analyzing each and every option and rejecting them just not because it doesn't feel right, it doesn't seem right, it doesn't hear right, etc. But we are rejecting them only on solid grounds. Okay. Option number C, plan a sprint to include the improvement ideas accounting for the dependencies of the external events. Now, this looks as a pretty good option to me because it is talking about planning a sprint to include the improvement ideas which your control user group is asking for, okay, and accounting for the dependencies of the external events which has been discussed in the scenario as well. So that looks like a holistic option, but we'll hold this option for now till we evaluate option D. Option D, fast track the project by planning to run parallel sprints. Now, this is also incorrect, guys. And the reason is quite simple, that once you do a fast tracking, there is obviously a higher cost that is involved. And also the scenario doesn't give enough confidence that just by running parallel sprints, you will be able to resolve the issues or the queries of the control user group, or maybe take into consideration the improvement ideas. And also you will be able to take into account the external dependencies or the external events. So this looks like quite a long shot option to me, and that is why option D is incorrect as well. So the correct answer to this question is option C, which is to plan a sprint to include the improvement ideas and at the same time accounting for the dependencies of the external events as it has been mentioned in the scenario.
I hope you are finding the video useful, guys. If you do, please consider subscribing to this channel. It will help me to understand that you consider these kind of videos useful for your exam preparation, and it will also motivate me to prepare more such content like this for you in my future videos. And now let's move on to question number 3.
Okay, so question number 3, guys. Pause the video, read the question and try to answer it before moving forward. This should be quite a straightforward one for you. Right, so let's start solving the question. Step number 1, read the question and try to categorize it as a type 1 or a type 2 question. You have been inducted into a project as the new project manager following the resignation of the previous project manager. You are committed and motivated to lead the project team and to direct them in the right way to achieve all the success metrics defined by the customer. What should be your first step? So if you see the stem of the question, guys, I hope you have watched this video on my YouTube channel already. This is a typical type 2 question which hints to a sequence of problem solving. Okay, now with that in mind, let's evaluate the options A, B, C and D, and let's see which one is the correct option. And while evaluating this, we will keep our positive bias principle in mind, which means that we'll not reject any option until and unless we have found a solid reason to reject that option. Okay, option A, reassess the project schedule to check if that is realistic for project delivery. Okay, now this is a bit of a off track option, guys, because you are coming into a project as a new project manager, and of course schedule is not the first thing which you check. Okay, probably it is a good idea when you are coming to a different team or a new organization. It should be a sensible approach to first understand what the project is, right? Rather than jumping directly into the schedule or maybe into the cost and try to optimize it. Okay, so that is a very childish way of doing things. So for that reason, option A is incorrect, because definitely schedule is not the first thing which you do as part of an onboarding when you go from team A to team B in a project. Next, option B. Plan to perform a team building exercise to motivate the project team. Okay, now team building exercise, motivating project teams, they are important, guys. I'm not saying that they are not, but this is not the first thing which you do when you move into a new team as the project manager. Okay, what is the sensible first thing which you do if you are moving from one project to another project, guys? You should first take your time and understand what the project is before jumping into, let's say, motivating teams, before jumping into understanding the cost structure and understanding the schedule structure, etc., etc. Okay, so that is why option B is also incorrect. Option C, review the project charter to understand the success metrics and associated risk. Okay, now we are talking, right? Reviewing the project charter. What does a project charter do? It talks about the scope of the project. It talks about the risks of the project. It talks about the funding allocations of the project. So it is essentially a birth certificate of a project, and it captures all the summary details which a new project manager need to know when he or she is inducted in a team as a project manager. Okay, but still we'll not mark option C and move on to the next question, right? We will still hold option C and evaluate to see that if option D is more correct or incorrect. Okay, so let's see. Review the learn from experience notes left by the previous project manager. Okay, again, this is not the first thing you do when you get inducted into a project, because let's say, logically speaking, guys, if you don't understand the scope of the project, you don't understand what the project is actually planning to deliver, right? The final product of the project, it is futile to start learn from experience of the previous project manager, because you will be missing the whole context. So again, you are jumping steps, right, which you shouldn't do as a good project manager, and that is what the whole essence of sequence frameworks are. Okay, I talk about these sequence frameworks more in my Udemy courses. So if you are already a student in my 35 PDU Udemy course, you know that I have dedicated an entire lecture in terms of helping you understand what these sequence frameworks are. But anyways, logically speaking as well, guys, as I mentioned, learn from experience notes is not the first thing which you refer to when you want to do a onboarding of the project. Okay, at least you go and start speaking with the sponsor, speaking with the stakeholder, start talking with the team members to understand what concerns and impediments they might be having, etc., etc. But in essence, you first understand what the project is all about. Okay, so for that reason, option D is incorrect as well. So the correct answer to this question is option C, which is to review the project charter to understand the success metrics and the associated risks in a project. And this is the most sensible option to go for as a new project manager who has been inducted into the project.
Next, let's move on to question number 4.
Right, so question number 4, guys. Pause the video, read the question. It might be a tricky question for you, and try to select an answer before we move forward. Right, so we'll start solving the question. So step number 1, read the question and try to understand that whether it's a type 1 question or a type 2 question, right? So in an agile project, the design and development team integrated an artificial intelligence module in the project to improve its performance. Okay, seems like a good approach to me. To validate the same, the team demonstrated the increased efficiency of the product via the next set of time-boxed iterations. Even better, so it is not only that the team has actually integrated that module, it has demonstrated also that this module will provide increased efficiency to the final product. Okay. However, now from here, things start to get interesting. In a recent sprint retrospective meeting, the product owner expressed discontent regarding the change since this was done without any approvals. Now, alarm bells should start ringing in your mind, right? Okay, a change done without proper approvals. It was instructed that the team roll back the improvements and redo the work based on the original product design, okay, which most probably didn't take into consideration this artificial intelligence module. How the project manager could have prevented this situation? Okay, now if we study the stem of the question, it hints at a behavior which the project manager needed to exhibit. And with that in mind, we might say that this is a type 1 question. Okay, now in a type 1 question, what we do, we use the ideal project manager behavior framework coupled with the positive bias principle. Now with that in mind, let's start evaluating the options one by one. Redefine the team ground rules and decision authority levels. Okay, it might be a good option. You might say that the project manager should define the team ground rules once again and define the decision authority levels for change management, let's say. But does it really mention change management, that decision authority levels of change management? It might be decision authority levels of cost. It might be decision authority levels of cost management. It might be decision authority levels of schedule management. Okay. Again, it's a bit broad option, but let's keep it on the table for now. Option B, put forward a recommendation to proceed with the change since this has demonstrated increased efficiency. Now, this is incorrect, okay? And that is primarily because it might have demonstrated an increased efficiency and you might as well put a recommendation to include it. Let's look at the stem of the question. What is the stem of the question asking from you? It is asking that how the project manager could have prevented the situation. It is not asking you that how the project manager now can move on with whatever has happened. Okay, so this is a very fine aspect of option B which you need to note, right? And that is why many of you might have selected option B thinking that it is okay to have a, let's say, gold plating of a project which will demonstrate increased efficiency. But that is not what the question is asking. The question is asking that how the project manager could have prevented this gold plating or prevented this extra bit of feature from being added to the final product. And that is why option number B is incorrect, because it is hinting towards progressing the project with this extra bit of feature already included in the product design. Okay, that's not what we are looking for. Option C, demonstrate servant leadership and plan to remove all impediments from the team. Now this is very generic option, guys. I hope none of you have selected it. And also look at this superlative all. Okay, so removing all impediments of the project just out of this single scenario looks quite a long shot to me, right? So that is why option C is also incorrect. Finally, option D, enable regular review meetings with the product owner and capture deviations early in the sprint. Okay, so now we are talking. So what option D is mentioning is, as a project manager, you enable regular review meetings, and these are often called sprint review meetings, right? Again, please refer back to my video on agile ceremonies and you will be knowing what is the structure of a sprint review meeting. Okay, so in a sprint review meeting, you talk about the possible deviations which can be incorporated in a project and whether you need to go for a formal approval for doing that, whether an informal approval is okay, but at least you need some sort of a heads up from the product owner or the customer before making any changes in the product, right? Because that is the essence of change management. Okay, so let's park option D as well. Now, if we come back to option A, guys, redefining team ground rules and decision authority levels is a very broad option, because team ground rules can mean hundreds of things, right? It can talk about the meeting procedure. It can talk about how a team should be planning leaves between themselves. Okay. It can talk about how a team should be communicating within themselves, etc., etc. And same goes for decision authority levels. So in your PMP exam, you will often get such broad options which will talk about definitely some good practices in project management, but those may not be relevant to the scenario. Very important. So option A may be correct in overall project management or overall in an agile or a hybrid project, but it is not quite relevant for the scenario that is presented in this question. So for that reason, option number A is incorrect, and the correct answer to this question is option number D, which is to enable regular review meetings with the product owner and capturing deviations early in the sprint. Also, before we move on to the next question, guys, I would like you to notice how we have rejected every option based on solid grounds before arriving at the correct answer.
I hope you are tracking your performance, guys. Okay, remember the target is to get all the 5 out of 5 questions correct. However, the minimum target is to get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct. Okay, now here comes the final one.
Question number 5, guys. Pause the video, Read the question properly, try to select an answer from A, B, C, or D before we go ahead and discuss the solution. Right, so let's start solving this question. The principal designer of a tunnel construction project has been reassigned to another project by his functional manager without the project manager's approval. So this often happens in a matrix environment where the project resources have a functional manager, which is the direct line of reporting, and at the same time they are assigned as a project team member and has a dotted line reporting to the project manager. Okay, so that's the essence of a matrix organization. The project team has expressed concern that this will slow down the project and may also cause design inefficiencies in the final product. So, what is the issue, guys? The issue is your project team has expressed concern that this will cause some problems in the project. It may cause design inefficiencies, it may slow down, it might increase the project cost, etc. etc. Okay. What should be the most effective action by the project manager to resolve this? Again, if we look at the stem of the question, this is a typical type 1 question. So we will trigger the ideal project manager behavior framework in combination with the positive bias principle. Option A, review the situation with the sponsor and formulate a response. So with that, what you are doing is you are escalating this to your sponsor. And remember, guys, in your PMP exam, in 99% of scenarios where the option talks about reviewing something with the sponsor, informing something to the sponsor, getting direction about something from your sponsor. So these are typically wrong options. Okay. Again, I have said 99%, but I have not said 100%, right? So there is still 1% of scenarios where escalating to a sponsor or let's say reviewing something with the sponsor makes sense. But here in this scenario, you as the project manager should take the call on what is the most effective way of resolving this situation. Reviewing this situation with the sponsor is not a PMBOK way of project management, and that is why option A is incorrect. Option B, hire an external design consultant to build design capability within the project team. Now, this is a very unrealistic option, guys, and that is why it is important to have real life project management experience for PMP exam. And it is because of primarily two reasons why option number B is incorrect. Reason number one, hiring an external design consultant will have financial implications in your project, right? It will not come for free. So that's point number one, and that needs to be assessed with the project funding. And the second reason why option B is incorrect is due to the unrealistic expectation that since your principal designer has now left, you start building the design capability within your entire team, because that honestly can take a long time and might not be very suitable for your project timelines, right? So that is why, because of these two primary reasons, option B is incorrect as well. Option C, acknowledge the concerns raised by the team and perform an impact analysis. Okay, so you can hold this option, looks like a decent option to me. Acknowledging the concerns, so you are acknowledging it as a servant leader and you are performing an impact analysis. Okay, let's hold this option for now. Option D, use coaching tools and techniques to keep the project team motivated. Okay, now you know what? That also looks a reasonable option to me because the project team is really concerned here, right? Now, their concerns can be valid, can not be valid. That needs to be assessed. Okay, but as the project manager, you first need to understand and resolve their concerns. Right, so we'll hold option D as well. So with the first level of iterations, we have eliminated option A, eliminated option B, left with option C and option D. Now let's look at these two options very closely in context of the scenario, guys. What is the problem you are trying to solve in this question? Are you trying to resolve the concerns of your project team, or you are doing a impact analysis of this change where the principal designer has left your project team? Which is the problem you are trying to solve, guys? Tell me honestly. Of course, it is the issue that your team is concerned, right? Now, this may slow down the project, this may not slow down the project, okay? That will come into consideration when you do the triple constraint analysis of this issue which has happened, okay? But the problem which you are trying to resolve in this scenario is to address the concerns of your team. And that can be done using coaching tools and techniques to keep your project team motivated, guys. Okay. Acknowledging the concerns and performing an impact analysis might have been a good idea if the primary problem you were trying to solve through this scenario is to understand whether this change will have an impact in your cost, in your scope, in your schedule, in your quality parameters, etc. etc. But it is very crucial to note here, guys, that the scenario is not presenting you the problem of assessing the impact of a change, okay? It is presenting you the problem of resolving the concerns of your project team. And because of this thin line of difference, option number D is the correct answer to this question, and option C is incorrect. And most of the PMP exam candidates who are not able to understand this thin line of difference between addressing a concern of a project team and addressing the impact of a change that has happened in the project will get this question incorrect. Okay, so as a final learning, guys, whenever you get such questions in your PMP exam which talks about issue resolution, etc., etc., or maybe root causing, always first try to assess that what is the core issue the scenario is talking about. In this situation, the core issue the scenario is talking about is the concerns you need to address as a project manager in your project team. It is not talking about the core issue to do a impact analysis of a change that might or might not hit your project at a future stage. Okay, so that is why option C is a very close option, guys, but it's an incorrect option, and the correct answer to this question is option D.
So that's the end of the quiz, guys. Let me know in the comment section below how did you perform, okay? I'd be very interested to know that. However, even if you have scored less, that you are not able to get 4 or 5 questions correct from this video, do not be disheartened or do not worry, okay? I'll be uploading more such practice question and answers videos like this on this channel in the future. So make sure you keep your bell notifications on to receive timely updates of those videos when I publish them. Meanwhile, please make sure that you check out my Udemy courses on PMP Certification Exam. I hope you liked the video, guys. Thank you, and I'll see you again in the next video.